Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Welcome to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews has been giving an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship. Listen to interviews with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys. And now, welcome your host, Marty McDermott, and Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 11 years now, we've been asking the entrepreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and we have a great show today. We're meeting with Meg Schmitz. And Meg is a franchise consultant for FranChoice. With deep knowledge of franchising, started in the 1990s, which is the first of 5 great clip salons in the Chicago area. As president of the Chicago area, owners co-op and liaison to corporate executive staff, Meg saw how others struggled because they bought a franchise that wasn't the best fit. We're going to talk to Meg about that in just a moment. Franchise Interviews. Stick around because we have a great show.
The Stone Coat Franchise Opportunity. Are you looking for a unique and lucrative franchise opportunity? If so, take a look at Stone Coat. With a patented process which creates a true stone finish on almost any wall or ceiling, Stone Coat is a true game-changing product in the multi-billion-dollar construction industry. Stone Coat is applied faster, cleaner, and cheaper than conventional quarried stone, which saves both time and money. With advantages in remodel and new construction of both residential and commercial projects, Stone Coat is a true crossover product. The Stone Coat franchise opportunity provides a low startup cost, low operating expenses, comprehensive training, ongoing support, and no royalty payments. For more information on the Stone Coat franchise opportunity, go to www.stonecoatfranchise.com. That's www.stonecoatfranchise.com, or call us at 972-380-2700. That's 972-380-2700.
Hi, this is Connie McDermott, Administrative Assistant for Franchise Interviews, LLC, and you're listening to Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 11 years now, we've been asking the entrepreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and as we were saying earlier, we have a great show today. We're meeting with Meg Schmitz, and Meg is a franchising consultant through FranChoice. And her deep knowledge of franchising started in the 1990s when she opened the first of 5 great clip salons in the Chicago area. Hi, Meg. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, thank you, Meg. This is our pleasure. We always like to ask our guests, where are you calling from this morning, Meg?
I split my time between the Chicago area and southern Wisconsin. So right now I am looking out. I'm in Milton, Wisconsin, looking over a beautiful lake with pelicans and eagles flying by. So I'll try to keep my attention on the interview and not on the lake.
That's fantastic. I get that. You have an interesting story, Meg. When I was reading about your background, maybe you could tell our listeners, how you got involved in franchising.
It was a complete surprise to me. My husband at the time, and this is important, went to a franchise expo in the Chicago area and looked at kind of the typical assortment of concepts that will go to an expo. Right. There was residential cleaning, janitorial, hair care, food, automotive, and he just sort of picked one, and he picked Great Clips. Fortunately, it's a rock-solid system, great operating support. But I didn't know that he wanted to own a business. And so as a consultant now, the 3 things that I say are my first priority is to take care of your wife, your lifestyle, and your money, because those were things that he kind of didn't put enough emphasis on in making a decision. And Great Clips was a great, as you can see, 5 locations later, I was bought out, an offer I couldn't refuse. But because he was not really taking into account, and we'll get to some of these questions, the psychology behind it, what's the reality of it, how long does it take, who are your employees and your customers? And so anyway, it just wasn't a good fit for him, and he was ready to kind of throw in the towel after about 6 months. So obviously we pulled it together, and I learned a ton from the Great Clips people.
What
it was a good
do you
experience.
like most about franchising, Meg? I mean, because, you know, again, you've been involved in it for quite some time now. I mean, it's decades we're talking about, so you have, you know, so much experience. What do you like most about franchising?
Well, so I continue to be an owner, but on the consulting side of it, I see all the different opportunities that come and some of them that go. From the standpoint of success for an investor, for an owner, what I really like and what I'm looking for are people who can follow a plan, people who like to bake, know how important it is. Every ingredient has a purpose. If you're an athlete and you've played on a successful team, it's all about team sports. If you've been in the military, if you've been a corporate executive, you know, there's a mission and a mission statement and operating procedures, and the customer as well as the employees know what the deliverable is. That's why I like franchising, is that it's predictable, reliable, 100% satisfaction guaranteed if it's done right. And if you've got the right owners in place.
That's interesting. You know, it's interesting because we've been doing this show now, Meg, for 11 years. And, you know, sometimes we'll have, you know, franchises on the show, and I think, you know, they're going to be like the biggest thing in the world. And then you hear like 5 or 6 years later that, you know, they've kind of gone under, you know, and it's scary. And, you know, this is really where, you know, a franchise consultant comes in. Maybe you could talk to our listeners a little bit about, you know, how the whole process works and what a franchise consultant does.
So I'm very particular that my process is, I'm not a broker. A broker to me is someone who says, hey, this is hot, take a look at it. For me, the whole process is getting, if I were working with you, Marty, I would want to know about you. I'd want to know about your household. Do you have kids? What kind of goals? What is this? Why are we talking? And so what do you want out of it? And so I lay the groundwork from the beginning that your wife, your life, and your money are 3 things that you're trusting me to take care of and take into account throughout the whole process. On the franchisor side, once I make the introduction of you to a franchise concept, then I walk with you the whole rest of the way. I can't deliver financials. I can't deliver performance. But at FranChoice, we've got a great group of people, a team led by our VP of Franchisor Relations. So he is doing a lot of the upfront vetting and screening, just that I would have you do, but I know that it's been done already by our corporate staff. So we've got, if you know the franchise disclosure document, we're looking at item 3. There's a problem in item 3, then you can go back to item 2. That's the executives of the company. And item 3 is litigation. That's what I'm referring to. There are the financial disclosures and then the statement of earnings, and that's all information that I walk through that digestion process with my candidates in order to determine, is franchising the right vehicle for you, and if it is, going back to who does well in franchising. And then the franchisor, I walk through, it's a 3-legged conversation, 3-legged stool, and full of transparency, so that it's kind of like meeting your future wife. You have somebody walking along with you to be the matchmaker.
It's interesting, you know, in talking to you, Meg, you know, because we've used some of those analogies, you know, on the show, you know, the 3-legged stool, you know, and, you know, those things are just, you know, so important. And, you know, I think what makes it interesting for you, you know, it puts you in a strong position because, you know, being a franchisee, you can really empathize with your clients, can't you?
Yeah, I can, absolutely. And because I'm consistently looking at franchise investments, and in my household, actually, we run the full spectrum from little startups that are looking for angel funds, anything from $10,000 to $50,000 to get going, all the way up to maturity when they might be ready to expand into franchising. I can empathize with everybody all day long about the fears and the concerns and the excitement and is it the right fit? Oh my gosh, am I really about to do this?
Yeah,
it's a great position for me to be in. If the answer is no, though, I try to get people to look at everything they've learned about themselves in order to get to know.
Absolutely. It's interesting in talking about, the spouse too. It's so important. It's one of the things that, when I first started the show, it never even really occurred to me is that, you really are bringing your spouse along for the ride and your family, when you're going into this thing, aren't you, Meg?
Yeah, I contributed some commentary to a book that was written recently, and you really just have to, when you have this idea that you want to own a business, you can look at independent startups, you can look at businesses that are represented by a broker. I think the beautiful thing about franchising, and I talk about this relative to corporate America and their hiring process, in franchising, we've got the Federal Trade Commission overseeing us.
Right.
We've got a franchise disclosure document that's now written in layman's terms. So I try to make it really, approachable and engaging for the spouse, so that from the very beginning their voice is being heard, and we can then navigate through all those questions.
Yeah, it's having the Federal Trade Commission involved, and the FDD. It is such a great document, isn't it, Meg? And I'm sure that when you're going through it, with your prospective clients, that it could be a little overwhelming. I've seen a number of them over the years, and sometimes some of them are easy to read and some of them are not so easy to read. So I guess you've seen so many of them over the course of time, and you know them because the clients that you work with. That really helps your customers, doesn't it?
It does, and going back a few years, you probably remember when the name changed, the document was called the Uniform Franchise Offering Circular, which people said, what does this even mean? To then being written in more layman's terms, the one word I really miss, Marty, is uniform. I wish it was still part of the name of that document, because it conveys so much that you're buying the same thing that I'm buying at the same price, at the same royalty, with the same support. So people don't necessarily realize that FDD, the Franchise Disclosure Document, is a uniform document that says for everybody in the system, you're all buying the same thing.
Do you find, Meg, that when you start working with someone that they have some preconceived notions? Like, do they have an idea of what industry they want to go into, and then does it happen where maybe you'll steer them towards another industry that they may have never even thought of before? Yes,
and this is something that I try to. This is a topic that I convey from the very first conversation. That you're going to be surprised. You're going to say, "What the heck? I never even knew that there were businesses that do this, let alone industries that." So I ask people to look at a wall, look at a white wall, and say, this is all white space. I don't know what I don't know about franchising, although everybody has an experience with franchising. They don't realize how often they walk into one and are a consumer. So I think an analogy that resonates with a lot of people is if you've got kids and you remember when they're little and they really don't like a certain food, or they really do like a certain food, people come to franchising with the same sort of thing. Oh, I don't want automotive. I don't want hair care. I really want food. So I'll play along with that. And if they have a really strong sense that they want food, then I'll put them through the paces on that and let them prove to themselves why. And maybe along the way they'll prove to themselves why not. So I always try to give 3 different options in 3 different industries, so that even if the other ones are a no, again, the no is just as important as a yes. They need to know. Interesting. You've been involved in franchising for such a long time now, Meg, even longer than myself. I got pretty much involved, I guess it was like in the late 90s. But, I remember when I started off, I always remember a number like saying like there was like 1,500 different systems out there, or 1,200 systems. And today, like I've seen the numbers like up to, I think it's over 3,000. You probably know better than I would at this point. But, it makes it difficult too, doesn't it, for, I guess, the prospective franchisee to, how do you narrow it down between, the 3,500 or 3,800 franchises? I guess where I'm going with this is, maybe you could talk a little bit about like the current state of franchising, because it does seem like there's always like new industries popping up, so, how does that affect the whole process? So, I saw a number this morning. You may know the name Joe Matthews. He's got a lot of good books and articles. I think the number I saw this morning, it was something like 3,672. Wow. So there's a life cycle to any business. When a franchise is ready to expand, one would hope, have ironed out all the kinks. But that's not necessarily the case, right? Some states are registration states where they oversee which concepts can sell in that state, and other states have no registration process. There's no governance or oversight, and I'm not a big one for governance and oversight, but I do think that there are a lot of concepts that start with people who want to expand rapidly. The cap table looks very desirable, having other people's money and having other people help to test the system. Yes. And I've been involved with a number of those companies, and some of them are going to make it past the early stages into more mature stages, and others are not. So I try to help candidates and I mostly work with personal referrals. So they already have a sense of who I am and what I do, or they found me via social media, and they can see what my background is. And I test people out on their risk-o-meter. Right. How much risk are you willing to take? And so there are some great new concepts that are in industries that are very old, like residential cleaning or hair care. I mean, let's go back to that. Hair care, how long has anyone been getting their hair cut at a franchise company? Well, let's see, Great Clips and Supercuts are all in their 5th decade now.
Yes.
And there are new hair care concepts coming up all the time, and people will get a little skittish about, well, I don't know that this is going to work. Yeah. And that really leads into then who are the leaders of the company, what is the niche that they're creating, what's their leverage point, or that a lot of people use disruption. Sure. How are they a disruptor? And does that fly with you on your risk-o-meter? So I frequently circle back to that to say, if this feels too risky, what is it about it that is giving you cause for concern? And we'll dig into that until you can say, oh, no, thank you. Or, let's keep going. It's there are a lot of new concepts, but some of them are really solid.
It's true, right? Some, I guess you don't know. I always, we've told this story on the show several times, Meg. I think he was one of the first. I think he was one of the first franchisees to KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken at the time. And you said, how did he know? I mean, because it was a new franchise that nobody knew that it was going to become a bigger name franchise. Or we've spoken about the earlier McDonald's franchisees. How did they know it was going to be so big? It's I guess so there is always that element of risk involved, even when we're talking about franchising. I think, and again, better than I, that people think when it's termed or labeled a franchise, they may be associated with McDonald's or Subway or something like that, so they say, okay, well, this is safe, and there's no risk involved, but it's really not that way at all, is it?
There's a huge amount of risk in anything you do every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And whether you're buying a car, getting married, or interviewing for a new job, there's due diligence, and that's what I'm here to help people with, is to be frankly honest with themselves about this entire process of doing research. And part of that is talking to existing franchisees.
Yes.
Recently, I had a panel discussion where I invited some of my successful franchise placements in the Milwaukee area to talk about best practices. And really what my observation was after that night's discussion was they all are facing risk too, even though they've been in business for more than 5 years. But we were talking about how much time and energy you still need to put into your employees and creating a culture, if you have employees, a culture where you are the employer of choice. Right. You mitigate a lot of risk by creating a culture within your company where there's teamwork, there's team building, there's attention to detail, there's focus on customer service, because the customer's coming in for the predictable, the reliable, the 100% satisfaction guarantee.
Right.
You can de-risk a lot by knowing what your brand is, what is the hook, why are you relevant, why does your customer care, and then why do your employees care? So those
are excellent points.
People can still, you can still fail, but
of course. I think it's interesting. Like, I always wonder how someone goes through this process without, someone like yourself. I mean, to go at it alone, it must be very difficult. And you know that there's people out there that probably do go at this alone. And you wonder, did they make the best possible choice? Did they get into the wrong industry, or did they select the wrong brand? And that's really where you come in. I mean, your background, I mean, I saw you even had like a background, I guess, in psychology as well, and I'm sure that even helps you with your clients as well, doesn't it?
Every day. Yeah, I grew up in a household with two medical professionals, a surgeon and a nurse, and my mom was a founder of a hospice in the Chicago area. And and I used to volunteer at that's the biggest transition any of us is ever going to make from life to death. So I try to get my candidates to approach this process as a fun process. But I do tell them along the way, if you're on a group conference call where everyone is asking questions of a franchisee, or at the end of the process when you're invited to Discovery Day, if it's a group Discovery Day, you're likely to be there with other people who are not as well educated or prepared as my franchisors expect from me. I get people all the way through looking at the itinerary and who are the people they're going to be meeting with at Discovery Day, and to know that there are less sophisticated or less prepared people who will also be there.
That's interesting.
And those are the people I think you're referring to, are the ones who find it on their own. It's organic growth. That, the franchise companies will invite in organic leads, and those people don't have a me to help them ask the questions and do the gut checks and get the finance. Let's talk about finances. Right. If you're undercapitalized going in, you got nothing but a headache or worse coming on. So I also help people navigate through which levers can they pull so that they don't supersize the deal and they don't undersize the deal. They have to have their financial goals in mind and then the financial wherewithal to make that goal come true.
Right, it's so important. Do you find that, a lot of your, we've spoken about it on the show only on several occasions, Meg, but I mean, do you find that some people are using franchising as a retirement strategy today?
Yeah, yes. I'm working
You do,
with,
okay.
I work with, so I'm 55 and looking at the future here, I'm still involved and invested in franchising as a retirement strategy. It's also a diversification strategy for a lot of people who are still in their career looking at, there are some industries that have very high turnover right now, and so they're contacting me to get invested into a franchise that may be manager run while they keep their job, knowing that at some point it will create an exit opportunity where now it's like an annuity. It's throwing off enough income that they can exit their job and, quote unquote, retire while managing this business or maybe multiple businesses. It's a great strategy.
I think so too. I mean, I've had a 401k now for a long time now, and it just you look at the growth, over the last decade, and you say, my God.
It's been great recently, I bet.
It's been great recently. I've been happy recently, but it's taken like a decade, to get to that point, so you finally say, okay, well, maybe I do have something here, but it does make sense, I mean, if you want to sometimes retire comfortably, I mean, to use franchising as a retirement strategy if you're a fit for that, so I think it's great. You talk about so many different topics, and I'm going to have you back on the show at some point again, Meg, because you talk about a variety of topics. And one of the things that interested me was you even talk about like artificial intelligence and how it's impacting the franchise sector. I thought, maybe you could just touch upon that because I thought that was interesting.
So we're invested
I know it's a deep question.
We're invested in a small company that's not so small anymore. Just by example, they're glasses that a technician, an HVAC technician would wear that has sound, and so it's got a microphone and camera on the glasses so that a lesser trained technician can go and check out an HVAC problem on the rooftop of a building. And then you've got Harry, the experienced guy, sitting back at the corporate office, and he can be watching 12 different monitors.
That's
so
incredible.
We've got talking each of the technicians through, oh, I can hear that. It sounds like a frayed belt. Scan over, look over to your right, and take the top off. So that's an example of artificial intelligence that is being used in HVAC, and it's helping franchise companies. This is one example. It helps franchise companies that are in the HVAC space where, I mean, if I could get on a soapbox and talk about parents, please look at your kids and sending them to trade schools. We have so many great trade jobs open. Yes. And we've got cosmetology. Everyone needs a haircut. We've got cars, and if it's hot out and your air conditioning doesn't work, you want it fixed. And if you're locked out of your car, you needed to get back in 5 minutes ago. These are great technical jobs, and all of them are going to stand the test of time. All of them are great investment opportunities where technicians are now being equipped smarter technology for diagnostic and repair. But we also see artificial intelligence, well, I'll tell you, like eyelash extensions are a big thing for women.
Yes, we've had those on the show,
You will never have a computer. You will never have a robot applying.
That's true.
Glue. So again, if I could put a plug in for parents with teenagers who are good with their hands and maybe you don't want to pick tuition, trade schools. There are so many great jobs in franchising, and we're growing faster. Franchise companies are opening and growing faster, and I can get you data points on that. I was reading another article on that earlier. But artificial intelligence is a big thing. Amazon proof is another hot topic.
Mm-hmm.
How do you stay relevant?
Right.
I said Amazon. I can hear my little Amazon Echo is trying to talk to me now. It's so crazy how.
The technology is fascinating, and I was unaware of that technology that you were talking about, Meg, so it's always interesting in doing this show such a long time now. I always learn so much from people like yourself, in having you on the show. And it goes back to that old tagline, that it's been around such a long time now, but I mean, franchising is being in business for yourself, but not by yourself, and that certainly still applies today, probably even more so today with the technology, I imagine.
Yeah. The franchisors, their point-of-sale software and the data that can be collected, the people who hopefully are back at the home office, reading those data points can help. That would have helped me so much with great clips way back when. So we've got the immediacy of being able to see real-time productivity of your employees.
Right.
There's a lot of reason to go into franchising. Pick a good one. This is what I'm here to help people do, is to find a good one. Technology today makes it so easy then, back to your point, in business by yourself, for yourself, but not by yourself. Pick up the phone and call corporate. If you got a question, you ran into a wall, your employees didn't show up, everybody's got chicken pox, you got customers out the front door, call corporate and ask them this is what they're there to do, is to support you through those questions that you don't know how to address yourself.
How did you know in the beginning, Meg, when you were, looking for a franchise yourself, I mean, how did you narrow it down to Great Clips, which, by the way, is an amazing franchise opportunity? So obviously, you made a very good choice and you were very successful with it. But was it difficult to narrow it down to that one single franchise, if you can go back to the beginning?
Well, so again, this was the big problem for me, is that my husband chose a brand and that's all he looked at.
Right.
Fortunately, Great Clips is rock solid, gold standard, and this is what I'm looking for now.
Right.
What I ask my people to please just entertain me, the candidates that I'm working with, entertain me, compare and contrast 3 different concepts in 3 different industries. Even if all 3 of them are a no, if you can give me a fact-based why it's a no, then I can navigate over to something else. So this compare and contrast, it's like when you're interviewing for a job or when you're looking at a house. You want to buy a house or a car.
Right.
Some people like me are pretty brand specific. I know what kind of a car I like to drive. But a business, when you're evaluating business, you're really evaluating more than the industry or the product. You're interviewing the leadership of that company and the infrastructure they're providing to you for that franchise fee and the royalty. So
that's true.
I'm a strong believer that the more you can compare and contrast, the more confident you'll be once you're on the inside that you made the right choice.
I think that's great advice. What are your thoughts on the franchise shows? Or Meg, what advice would you give to someone attending a franchise show? You know, they're all over the country. We have one coming up in New York. I think it's in May.
Yeah.
But, you know, what's your advice to someone attending a franchise show? I remember going to my first one, and it was overwhelming. You know, the first time I went to one, I was like, oh, my God, look at all these different franchises. You know, it's like, where do you begin? You know, what advice would you give to our listeners?
The first thing I would tell people is go and sample all the food, but don't let your stomach dictate your brain.
That's good.
Because there are always a lot of different food concepts that are there. And you're going back to a comment you made, people associate franchising with food, so it's a natural point of curiosity. I hope when people go to those shows, they go with their eyes wide open to say, oh my gosh, to your point, look at all the things that are out here.
Right.
Then take a step back and again, don't let your stomach dictate your brain. There's a decision-making process that's far more than what you see and what you taste. And because those people are there at the show to talk to Joe, any old Joe, right? And so they know that they're going to be talking to people who are not sophisticated business owners. And so there are a lot of questions that people going to those shows should ask after they go. Pick up the phone and call someone like me to say, this is what I saw.
Right.
Now, how do I make sure that they're legit?
Right, exactly.
The same thing with, I think, the entrepreneur, like the Fortune or the entrepreneur, those, you know, the top 500. People don't realize companies pay to be considered. It's not Entrepreneur Magazine choosing through a process of compare and contrast. Yeah, it's the same thing as a trade show. You just go and have fun and then do your research afterwards.
And ask lots of questions, you know.
Ask lots of questions.
Are there, you know, it certainly helps. And, you know, you make a lot of great points about that. FranChoice is an excellent company. I remember when FranChoice even began way back when, Meg, you know, I mean, and they've really become, I guess you could say, you know, I mean, the leading, you know, service, you know, in your particular industry. You know, maybe we could talk, a little bit about them, you know, or how someone can get in touch with someone like you, you know, if, you know, they listen to the show and then they say, you know what, but I'm going to need help with this whole thing. How do they move forward and call someone like yourself and work with FranChoice?
So FranChoice is a group of consultants. There are probably 80 of us around the country now. Mm-hmm. If people would like to talk to me because of what they're hearing here and the process that I would lay out, it's easy to find me. I'm at megschmitz.com.
Okay.
FranChoice, I knew Jeff Elgin. Here we go in the Wayback Machine. When my former husband went to that franchise expo and saw Great Clips, he met Jeff Elgin. Jeff Elgin was the vice president of franchise development with Great Clips. And so as I was getting in and getting going and making all the mistakes with the first location and then expanding to 5, I was the co-op president in Chicago, and Jeff Elgin got to know me. He said, you know, I'm splitting away. I'm leaving Great Clips. I'm going to start this consulting company, because rather than try to force a square peg in a round hole, not every gainfully employed executive should be owning a Great Clip. What if we represented a lot of different brands and people could make their own educated decision about which is the right fit for them? So we help people realize their dream of business ownership via a really solid process of research and investigation with the franchisor. We screen the franchise companies that we work with. So I've known Jeff now for 26 years.
Long time,
and I'm in my 16th year of consulting. And, we've got really high standards. I'll just say this. My reputation, because I work with people like your listeners who are going to pick up the phone or connect with me, my allegation, Marty, is to you. You will never have me on your show again. You will never make reference to me as an expert if I handle your people with anything less than kid gloves. So my first obligation is to make sure that if I get a referral from you, that you know that they're in good hands and they're gonna land well. Or if they don't land in franchising, I'm going to send them on their merry way to do something else. And I'm an open book for networking. I'm happy to help people find a job if business ownership isn't the right thing. How they can find me is megschmitz.com, really.
MegSchmitz.com. We'll post that on the show page too, Meg. We'll have that link up there as well. But it must bring you. Your job must be very rewarding. In the sense that you're changing people's lives. This is that you said earlier. This is a big decision. It's almost as big as marriage, isn't it? It's you got that 10-year commitment sometimes in a big financial investment. It's more costly sometimes than a wedding, right? So it's up there as far as the biggest decision you're ever going to make in your life, and you're part of that whole thing. What does that feel like for you?
Well, it's great for me because again, I stick with people through the entire decision-making process to the point well beyond when they sign their franchise agreement. I'm here. Don't ever forget me. I'm an ongoing living resource who's got today experience as a franchise owner. So I try to stay in touch with everybody that I've placed. I do have people who at some point say, I'm in, but it's not working for my family, and it's my marriage or get out of the business. Can you help me? Those are heartbreaking moments, but absolutely, I am here to help people. If you're going to move, whatever the life change is.
Right.
So I stay really close to my people well after. I made mention of the group in Milwaukee where I had the panel discussion recently. I get all of my placements in Milwaukee together once a month. They're welcome to come. It's an open forum. We just talk about best practices, what's going on. Do you have a question or a concern or heartache, heartbreak? I'm hitting the wall. How to help me get unstuck? So talk about rewarding. It's not that people sign on and I never talk to them again. It's like watching my babies grow up.
Of course. Yeah. And that must bring you great joy to see that, some people, and this, they become very, very successful in franchising. They make a significant amount of money. I know that you've seen it. And that just, to know that you were part of that whole thing, it just must be an incredible experience for you. And I think it's great too that you continue that relationship. Sometimes I've heard compared to say, okay, well, a franchise broker is like a real estate agent. It's not, because a real estate agent doesn't call you after you buy the house and say years later saying, oh, are you happy with the house? I don't know of any. I've never had that situation, but you continue that relationship, and I think that's such an important part of the process, isn't it?
It is. I don't know anybody who does it quite the way that I do. I know that some of my colleagues try to stay in touch and do maybe a newsletter or something. I have meetings. So again, back to my reputation. It is super rewarding for me. People circle back around and say, I'm having this challenge. Have you ever seen anything like it? Chances are I have, and I've lived through it.
Yes.
I also use the Wizard of Oz as an example. Sometimes, the franchisor isn't this thing behind the curtain pulling levers. These are real people who want you to succeed. No one's going to make you succeed any more than you want to succeed.
Right.
But we're here to help.
They need you to
We're here
succeed,
to help.
Right. Yeah, and I remember now. I think you mentioned that and I scanned that Joe Matthews article, and I thought that was fantastic. I'm going to have to go back to it again, Meg. But I thought it was interesting. I remember one part of that article. I think he was saying that most franchisors, I guess they have less than 100 franchise units, but the franchisor. You bring up a very good point. Is that the franchisor is very dependent on the franchisee's success, aren't they?
They are, and it comes up in a lot of different ways. One in particular is in the franchise disclosure document. They have to disclose bankruptcies, failures, people who have exited the system, and make that their contact information available so that as part of the due diligence, if you wanted to find out why did I leave the Great Clip system, I'm in the FDD. So people
Right. It's a report card,
corporate,
isn't it, Meg? Yeah.
It is perfect. That is exactly right. If corporate America had to be as transparent as we have to be about our successes and failures, the revolving door would stop. But there's a huge amount of, and I don't think people think about this, what does entrepreneurialism have to do with franchising? Well, every great franchise concept started as an entrepreneurial endeavor. And if that founder and CEO is still involved, that's their baby. Yeah. They don't want to see franchisees fail. So I think post-2008 to 11, when we had the last recession, franchisors got a lot smarter about who they bring into their system and being less cavalier about everybody's going to make it, because we know that not everybody's going to make it. So let's make the right pairing. Let's make the right match.
And that's where you come in as well, because you can tell, I imagine in the early stages, again, because you know what questions to ask someone, if someone is a match for franchising and someone is not a match for franchising. I imagine you could probably, after all these years of doing it, you could probably tell pretty quick, right, if they're a match or not.
Yeah. Yeah, and that it was really heartbreaking in that 2008 to 11 phase when executives were being everybody was losing their jobs. It was terrible.
Right.
And people would say, well, I can't get a job, so I'll buy a franchise because it's an easy way to replace my paycheck. It was heartbreaking when I had to tell people they weren't cut out for franchising either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was probably a lot more no's back then, right? Saying, sorry, this is
let's
for
not
you.
throw good money after bad. Yeah.
Right.
If it's not right for you and you're not going to succeed as a franchisee, you're going to show up in the franchise disclosure document, item, was it 2020 or I think it's the people who have exited the system.
Right,
Franchisors really want to try to protect that and keep it to a minimum.
That's fantastic. What's the best way for our listeners? I know you plugged the website earlier, but if anyone's tuning in late, Meg, what's the best way for our listeners, again, to get more information? Even if there's any phone numbers you want them to call, you can plug those if you like.
Okay, super. My one and only phone number is 847-302-2601. Okay. 847-302-2601. So email, text, call me. My website, megschmitz.com. It looks awesome. We just got it updated, and a lot of great video interviews are on there, people that I've placed and worked with. I'm pretty shameless about, I will talk to anybody. If you've got a question, ask me anything, and we will navigate through the process, and if it's a fit, we'll go forward, and if it's not, I'll help you figure out where you want to go next.
Well, it's been wonderful to have you on the show, Meg. I could tell you really enjoy your work, and I think that's so important, and I would love to have you back
your
again.
Work.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
It's been great. You have a great tone of voice, and it comes right through the phone. I feel like you're sitting here talking to me.
Well, I could probably talk to you for 2 or 3 hours about this, and I know you have a busy day, but there's so many different, topics that you talk about in franchising that really piqued my interest, and I said, I have to have you on the show. So I'm sorry I waited 11 years, but I'm glad I finally had you on the show. It's been a privilege to talk to you.
It has been a pleasure. Ask me anything. I'd be happy to talk to you anytime, Marty. You're a joy.
I'll take you up on that, Meg. Absolutely. It was great to have you on the show, Meg, and we'll be right back with more franchise interviews. Coming up on segment 2, you're going to hear what every franchipreneur needs to know before buying a franchise. We're going to play a clip from our popular Great Quotes in Franchising podcast right here on Franchise Interviews.
Are you one of those special people who are willing to go after your dreams and goals? Are you ready to fulfill that dream of owning your own business with the security of a proven brand? The opportunity to take control of your future and own a Rita's Italian Ice franchise is within your reach.
Rita's is seeking success-oriented individuals who are ready to make a change in their life, and Rita's offers unparalleled training and support to assure your success. And did you know the frozen treat industry is a recession-proof industry, and there are Rita's in 23 states currently with 540 stores open. Rita's Italian Ice has been around for 25 years and is listed as a top-performing franchise by the Wall Street Journal.
Now here's the really good part. Rita's Italian Ice is a unique and amazing taste treat. It's smoother than a snow cone, and it combines ice with real fresh fruit. The real fruit adds dramatically to the taste, and it comes in over 40 flavors. The ice and fruit are mixed on site and made fresh daily, and it is delicious.
You'll want to know more about this exciting and successful franchise opportunity. Go to www.ownaritas.com and get all your questions answered. That's www.ownaritas.com to take control of your dreams and future today. You don't want to wait any longer to be a part of this adventure. www.ownaritas.com.
Franchisers, are you looking to reach aspiring entrepreneurs looking to buy a franchise? Are you looking to reach a highly educated audience on franchising? For over 8 years, Franchise Interviews has been giving an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship through our website, franchiseinterviews.com, where you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising. Our weekly franchise radio show where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys, and our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919. That's 610-905-2919.
Hi everyone, this is Marty McDermott from Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, where each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. You know, we've been hosting Franchise Interviews many years now. We've had some incredible guests on the show. Today you're going to get to hear from Todd Leff, and Todd is the CEO and president of a franchise called Hand and Stone, and Todd has many, many years experience, and we always like to ask the veterans in franchising, what is your advice to our listeners as far as their quest to buy a franchise? And I thought Todd's response was quite brilliant. He narrowed it down to 3 questions you should ask, and we're going to hear that right now.
Spending significant time out there, really marketing the business, and that's where they can add value, to growing the business.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've been doing this such a long time. The questions I was excited to ask you is what advice would you give to our listeners on buying a franchise, Todd?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I will give you my 3 questions that I tell every new prospect. These are the 3 questions you should answer in looking at any franchise. One is, do you believe in the long-term growth of the industry? Because it's very hard in an industry that's flat or declining to claw away market share from other established competitors. So me personally, I was looking for an industry that had long-term growth potential. Number 2, do you believe in the underlying business model of that franchise? Because you can have a great industry and have a business model that doesn't work. So you have to get into the building a pro forma, looking at what the potential revenue is and what that would produce. And then the third question I tell people to ask is, can you see yourself fitting culturally with the organization, whether that's the management team that you'll be working with at the franchise, the people you'd be working with in the business, and the other franchisees in the system. Do you see yourself being able to get along and work with those groups and have confidence that these people can lead a brand forward? So I think if you can answer all 3 of those questions yes, then you really have something that you ought to investigate carefully and proceed with.
Wow, that's well said. We have what's called the Great Quotes in Franchising. I think we're going to have to put that in there. I think that's fantastic advice.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.